Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada, we love you. In Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave. On a beautiful July the 25th, 2019, Big C, Rondo Deportes. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, NFL training camps are running in earnest right now. Players are out sweating their behinds off. We're just a week away from the first live action in a preseason game, and baseball is swinging hot bats right now.
Yeah, they definitely are swinging hot bats, and I was watching a lot of movies from the past, and one of my favorite movies that I saw was he was swinging a big, I think it was called Walking Tall. It's amazing they don't make movies about guys that walk around hitting people with the bats, Big C, but that's one of the greatest movies of all time. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, there have been two versions of Walking Tall, Charlton. The last one was Tom Cruise, who's a very short guy, so he had to stand on high heels to go out there and walk tall. But, very exciting movies, both of them.
Yeah, they are very exciting. It's all fair in love and war. So many great things happening. It's almost like that Christmas. For Christmas, you ever sneak down and wonder what's in the gift? You try to shake it, not realizing that there was some glass, and it wasn't even your gift, and the glass was broken by the time somebody opened it. But that's all fair in love and war. I want to say today, show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. When you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. I know so much is happening in sports, and we talk about it all the time, whether it's sports or boxing. There's always something going on. In the sports world, there was another boxer that lost his life, and it's like things happen in threes, and we don't want to talk about it, but when it happens, it happens. His name is Santillan. He's only 23 years old, and he's the second boxer to die, this week alone, Big C. And I know it's almost shocking at first, and then it's back to business as usual. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's not shocking when you get an incident like this, Charlton, because boxers, as we spoke about the other day, go through so much trying to get to the top of the pinnacle.
Yeah.
It's not like in another sport, you lose a game, you got another opportunity 2 nights later or the next week.
Yeah.
In boxing, you lose an opportunity to fight for the championship.
Yeah.
It takes 2 to 3 years to crawl back up that ladder, so boxers don't know how to give in.
Yeah.
And even in the corner, from their perspective, they've always looking at, this is our golden opportunity. Maybe he can weather the storm.
Right.
You have an official in the ring paying close attention to the boxer's wealth and welfare.
Yeah.
Welfare. He's not being attentive either, Charlton. He's trying to let the fighter fight through it. As long as that he's showing that he has the ability to duck punches, to defend himself, referees are a little more reluctant to stop a fight. You also have the ringside judges. You have the doctor at ringside.
Yeah.
So he's not there by himself. These are unfortunate incidents that are occurring in sports. I mean, there's been death in every major sport there is in America.
NASCAR.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it's also the path of life that we take. People are willing to risk it all in the sports arena, Charlton, to ascend to the pinnacle of sports. And they're willing to sacrifice their bodies to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, you've followed sports for many years, and I just want to get your thought. He's an Argentine boxer, and his name is Hugo Alfredo Santillan. Passed away today in Buenos Aires of injuries suffered in the ring during Saturday's draw against another fighter, Eduardo Javier Abreu. And if this were to happen in a football arena, or if on a basketball, I remember when Hank Gathers collapsed and passed away back in the day with Loyola Marymount, and then they do a lot of issues and studies. There was a basketball player for the Miami Heat, came from Toronto, one of the all-star players that actually had to retire, played with LeBron and Dwayne Wade. And he had to
Chris Bosh, but he's not the first to have retired because of health issues.
Yeah, but he's one of the most notable. And I know with his situation, unlike in boxing, I guess you are right. It's news for one day. People say our thoughts and prayers are with you, but it's kind of what they sign up for. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, if you look at where the fight took place in Argentina, Charlton, how close is that to the United States? You think about it, until they had worldwide sports broadcasting, Charlton, how many fighters lost their lives in the ring that nobody knew about from around the world? You didn't hear about stuff from Argentina, Venezuela. You didn't hear stuff about from Great Britain, Russia, China. You didn't hear about these things. But now that you have a 24-hour news cycles and sports cycles, Charlton, these things are coming to the foresight.
Yeah.
They've always been part of boxing, the tragedy of the ring.
Yeah.
It's just that now, because sports networks need to fill their cycles, Charlton, they'll bring you any type of news, whether it's good or devastating.
Yeah.
And they put it on the front page of the news. But, 50 years ago, no one would have known about that unless you're in that country or in that region.
Yeah. Well,
so that we're hearing about these things now. I don't know if it's good for the sport that you're constantly broadcasting those things about the deaths and things of fighters. I mean, even today in Memphis, Tennessee, the ex-wife of Lorenzo Wright, a former Memphis Grizzly basketball player, pleaded guilty in his death. She had him assassinated 9 years ago.
Wow.
They found his body 10 days after he was assassinated. She did it for an insurance policy because they were going to a divorce and custody situation.
Wow.
So when you think about how heinous people are for money, here's a guy's ex-wife had him assassinated over a life insurance policy and the custody of a kid. Had him shot out in a swampy area of Memphis, Tennessee 9 years ago. Tomorrow is when they found his body.
So
you think about the death that occurs in sports. I mean, we have natural death all the time, death that occurs in sports because of an event that occurs, and death that occurs in sports for money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a horrid world that we live in for what people will do just for money.
What people do for money, and that's something that you brought up. I know there was another player that was out of Northern California that did the same thing with his fiance. We know life happens in sports and outside of sports, but when it's a sporting person, obviously it's more magnified. I do want to bring up a hotline number that we always want to give out just because people go through issues. And when they go through issues, at least on Big C Sports, we want to be a part of that. We never just want to be a sports program that says, hey, do you know who won the game last night 5-4? There's a national hotline for people going through issues, whether it's suicide or depression, and you can call 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. I know kids are out of school now. A lot of bullying happens, even cyberbullying. So they can text if they need some help. You can text 838-255. That's 838-255, and they can hopefully get some help. And again, it's all fair and love and war. I want to bring up something as football season is really getting underway. There's so many people, if you recall, the movie that Will Smith made. It was called Concussion with Dr. Ben Amalo, and Will Smith was part of that. They chronicled the Pittsburgh Steelers in the steroid era, and it was dealing with CTE. Now, there were so many players, Big C, many players in the NFL, they don't like the helmet targeting rule. In fact, last year, there were 55 penalties called in the first 33 preseason games. Although many players, they want to be a part of the concussion lawsuit, they don't like how the NFL is trying to keep them safer, if that makes any sense. Your thoughts?
Well, the NFL have rule changes to prolong and make the game safer.
Yeah.
And everybody's adjusted to every rule change that has ever been made in the NFL.
Yep.
Most people don't realize that the goalpost used to sit on the goal line in the NFL.
That's right.
And they moved it to the back of the end zone. Everybody made that adjustment to that extra 10 yards, making that field goal an extra point longer, Charlton.
Yeah.
The hash marks have been moved in the NFL. Everybody made adjustments to the hash mark. They made adjustments to the play clock.
Yeah.
Everybody made adjustments to that. They made adjustments to hand rules. It used to be you could beat the hell out of a receiver from the line of scrimmage all the way down the field till the ball arrived.
Yeah.
Defensive backs and linebackers made that adjustment also.
Yeah.
So every rule change that has come along in the NFL over the decades has been about the betterment of the game and the safety of the ball players and to make the game more exciting.
Yes.
So as these players cry about the helmet rule, Charlton, I mean, it's something that should have been taken out of the game many years. We talk about concussions with players. Think about the number of players that have had broken necks in their career in the NFL. I know the most famous one everybody remembers is Darryl Stingley when Jack Tatum hit him in the Oakland Coliseum back in the mid-'70s, and broke his neck. Darryl unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. Mike Utley, an offensive lineman with the Detroit Lions, broke his neck and, was paralyzed the rest of his life, quadriplegic, just in a game. There's been a multitude of players. I mean, a famous NFL Hall of Fame linebacker, Nick Bonacani, son broke his neck while he was in college. He's been a quadriplegic that whole time. These are things that are not spoken about. They talk about, the league trying to make the game safer, penalizing players that are healthy. But those healthy players are not thinking about those players who have lost their career with spinal injuries, Charlton, with cracked vertebrae in their neck. They can still walk, but they Ryan Shazier is the most notable one recently,
for Pittsburgh,
who broke his neck in a game. And through medical science and technology, he is walking again. But he was partially paralyzed prior to medical technology intervening, Charlton, and getting him to the point of being able to function again as a walking human being. So these are the things that the players that are making all the money are not thinking about. They're not thinking about those players who have lost their careers, some who have lost their lives because of the injuries, being able to strike someone in the head, Charlton.
Well, as a defensive player, and I know sometimes in your own word you were a dirty player. Now, dirty is you say it's in the eye of the beholder or the hand of the beholder. Which one was it, Big C?
Well, I took a shower after the game, so I was clean once the event was over.
They say the dirt comes off in the wash, Big C. So, as a player, I hear so many athletes. Terry Bradshaw was on a program just earlier this week, and he was talking about how tough the game was back in the day. Every player thinks it was more tough when they played, and how you really can't touch people now. I remember Green Bay had an egregious play against some of their linebackers that happened to cost them a game last year. I think it Matthews and many other players. So I want to get your thoughts, and again, everybody has their own opinion. Do you think the league is going too far, or can they go further? Do people really want to be safe, Big C, in the game of sports? Your thoughts?
No, the league has not gone too far, and Terry was very right when he talked about the game is not as tough as it once was. Terry Bradshaw one time was slammed into the ground head first by a defensive end named Joe Turkey Jones with the Cleveland Browns. Terry went into convulsions. Jones slammed him so hard into the ground. He was sitting there just wobbling like a chicken with his head cut off. Now, in today's game, Jones would be suspended for 6 games for pile driving a quarterback into the ground. Defensive linemen were allowed to do that. You could go upside an offensive lineman's head. You could go around the neck of a quarterback anytime he was trying to throw the ball, Charlton, and take him to the ground. We did that with gusto back in the day and never were penalized for it because everything was legal. I understand the safety parameters that the league is trying to put in because you need to spend some time with some old-time players, guys who are in their 60s and their 70s, walking around with canes, got joint replacements, Charlton, neck fusion and all of these things, shoulder replacements. This is what the fan doesn't understand who's watching the game. I used to work out in gyms, during the off season, and guys would always say, well, I could play the game, and I would always tell them, we have tryouts all the time.
All the time,
Show up. You might be bigger than me in the gym or stronger than me or whatever because this is all you do. You don't make any money out of it. But show up to training camp and see don't you get your ass whooped. Tell people that all the time. Because there's always tough guys walking up and down the street. But it's like watching a wrestling match on television and knowing that it's orchestrated. But get into the ring with one of those guys and you'll wish you never even put your pants on that day.
Well, I know there's a lot of guys in mixed martial arts. There's a guy by the name of Robertson. He's a California Muay Thai state champion, and he's amazing. He's about 6 feet tall, about 200 pounds, and he has incredible, impeccable martial arts skills. And he's not as big as a lot of guys walking around the gym, but he could put them to sleep in about 10 seconds. It's about what you know, not how big you are. I want to get your thoughts on one more egregious player. People think guys like Dick Butkus. Dick Butkus was not that tough of a player compared to guys now. Deacon Jones, I think there were times where he talked about wanting to hurt people, not to send them to the hospital, but to make them go to the sideline at least. Your thoughts? Can he play in today's game?
Well, Charlton, we all wanted to hurt people. We wanted to render people unconscious. We wanted to make your day a very bad day playing defense. That was the mantra of football back in that era, Charlton. you were allowed no holds bar. It was like a boxing match. You hit it. Well, really, today's MMA matches, you equate to football in the 60s, 70s, and 80s on how players played the game.
Yeah.
We didn't sit there and worry about getting a penalty. A penalty to us was like a completion of a pass play or a long run play. If you took 15-yard penalty for unnecessary roughness or whatever, you had pass plays that were 15 yards.
Yeah.
But the difference in taking a penalty back in the day when I was playing, Charlton, it served as intimidation.
Right.
That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to get another player off kilter. You didn't want him to be comfortable. If a wide receiver caught a pass and went down and somebody touched him on the ground, back in those days, you could drill his butt. When he hit the ground, you didn't have to touch him. You put the helmet in his ribs.
Yeah.
That's what you could do.
Yeah.
But the difference was, Charlton, if you took a penalty on a player and didn't let him catch that pass, that player didn't look to catch the pass the next time he came over the middle.
Yeah.
A running back swinging out of the backfield, if a defensive lineman decided to clothesline him before he could get into his route, that was acceptable as long as it was behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
So you would do these things to intimidate people. The game was about intimidation when I played. Yes, we played the game because you wanted to score and you wanted to win.
Yeah.
But you had more relishing intimidating your opponent than just playing the game straight.
Have you seen a more fearless defensive back than Jack Tatum? They called him dirty. I mean, he was probably a dirty player for the Raiders, but back in his day, it wasn't dirty. But have you seen anyone in today's game that could even come close to his ferocity? Big C, your thoughts?
You know, the closest I saw to Jack Tatum after Jack retired, I'd say would be Steve Atwater. Everybody talks about Ronnie Lott. Steve Atwater, who played with Ronnie Lott at he played at the University of Arkansas, played with the Denver Broncos, to me was the most fierce hitting safety in the NFL.
Yeah.
He played in Denver. Ronnie had the fortune of playing in San Francisco, and they were winning championships. But when you walked around the NFL and you asked players, receivers, who was the fiercest hitting safety in the game, that was Steve Atwater in Denver.
Yeah, obviously everybody has their own opinion, but when you've been taken, I knew some guys that were taken out by Jack, and they thought, he was a dirty player, and he wasn't the biggest guy. Comparing him to Ronnie Lott and Steve Atwater, there was a big size difference, but his heart was as big as any of them. If you think about now, we are officially 7 days away from the NFL opening of the preseason, the Denver Broncos versus the Atlanta Falcons, and that's going to be in Canton, Ohio. And football just brings back a buzz. I think even from the high school level, there's so many big games on the horizon. On the high school level, you have St. Thomas Aquinas out of Florida. I believe they've won 10 state championships in Florida over the years, playing against De La Salle out of California. They've won 28 Bay Area championships without a loss, 28 in a row, and they're going to open up in California. So a lot of people are happy about that. But give me your feeling on this game in Canton, Ohio, with Atlanta and Denver. I know it's an exhibition game, but are you happy about it's almost here, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're a week away from football, and I mean, everybody is salivating across the country. I mean, football is king in the South, whether it's high school, college, or professional.
Yeah.
And to have one of the Southern teams opening up the preseason, Charlton, with the Atlanta Falcons, I think that bodes well for the NFL overall, getting everybody excited about what's going on. The Denver Broncos will have a new look with Joe Flacco at quarterback. We know what happened the last time that the Denver Broncos brought in a former NFL, Super Bowl winning quarterback, MVP.
Yeah.
They went to a Super Bowl again, and John Elway is hoping that lightning strikes twice in doing this, rejuvenating some quarterback's career, bringing him in to lead a team where he has a great defense, and that's what Denver has.
Yeah.
Is a tremendous defense. They had Bradley Chubb and Von Miller on the outside. Two of the best defensive end, is probably the best defensive end combination in the NFL, and probably the only one that's close to it is the one there in Houston with Clowney and Watt, when both of those guys are healthy. When you look at Atlanta on the flip side, Charlton, and you think about receiving cores that a team has, I don't know if any NFL team has a better receiving core than the Atlanta Falcons, led by Julio Jones, a perennial All-Pro, and if not the second best receiver in the NFL. You have Mohamed Sanu, who has been a 1,000-yard receiver in the past. Then you have all-rookie Calvin Ridley out of Alabama, who led all rookie receivers in touchdown receptions last year. Matt Ryan had a year last year equal to his MVP year when the Falcons went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
If the Falcons can find a way to win, to play some defense, they'll win at least 10 games on this upcoming season.
Yeah, they look good. They missed their chance when they had the Super Bowl in their own stadium and wasn't able to rise to that occasion. But they're always there. They have the greatest stadium, most arguably the best stadium in the NFL, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And so we'll look forward to what happens in that. But I want to just bring to your attention the Chicago Bears, the Minnesota Vikings, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tennessee Titans, the New Orleans Saints, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They all began their chase for the Lombardi Trophy, Super Bowl 54, as they all started training camps today. And, the Saints are still having a holdout, but it's probably going to be solved within about 10 days or so. Big C, your thoughts?
Yeah, but what does holding out of the first couple of weeks of training camp? That means that you're fresh towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
When you have all pro players holding out, they're not going to get any work realistically in the first 2 preseason games anyway.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't do them any good to go to training camp. In the NBA, they talk about load management.
Yeah.
Monitoring a player's time on the court.
That's right.
Sitting him down certain games. Think about a running back and a wide receiver when they go to training camp. All the routes that you have to run, all the carries that you have to have during training camp. Now, if you miss, 2 weeks of training camp, and that's 200 less plays that you have to run during the regular season that you missed during training camp, Charlton, you're going to be fresher during the year. There's too much made of players not being in training camp. You think about this first preseason game with the Broncos and the Falcons.
Yeah.
These 2 teams will each play 5 preseason games. The NFL is already talking about reducing the preseason down to 2 games.
Yeah.
Now you got 5 games between 2 teams that they're going to have to play an extra game each during the preseason. You think any veteran player wants a part of that?
Well, I'm telling you, they don't make any more money for preseason games. But just a quick trivia question. When you look at Flacco coming into this game and he's playing against Ryan, I know it's preseason, but let's just say it's a Super Bowl game. Who would you like to have the ball more? In 2 minutes left, down by 4, you got to drive 80 yards. Who would you trust to get it done, Flacco or your friend down south in Ryan? Your thoughts?
Well, the thing about Flacco, we don't know how he's going to mesh with the receiving core in Denver. This is a work in progress with Joe Flacco right now. We haven't seen him take a snap, a live snap, and I don't even know if he's going to play much in this opening game, more than 1 or 2 series, Charlton, at best. You look at Matt Ryan. He has a receiving core that you can trust. He has Jones, he has Sanu, and he has Ridley. And he also has Austin Hooper, who made the Pro Bowl last year at tight end.
Yeah.
So when you look at the receiving core that he has his top running back coming back in Devontae Freeman.
Yep.
He has an intact offense. So right now, if you're making that choice, you're going to go with Matt Ryan.
Give me your feeling on Tampa Bay and Tennessee. Marcus Mariota, since he came out of St. Louis High School, Honolulu, Hawaii, he shined in Oregon for the Pac-12 Conference, played in the BCS Championship game. They lost to Ohio State. And then you look at what Tampa's going to line up. If it's going to be Winston, if he keeps his head clean, which one of those players do you have more confidence in? They've both been hurt or had their own off-the-field problems. You like Mariota, Big C, or would you go with Winston? Your thoughts?
Well, both of these quarterbacks were drafted 1 and 2 when they came out of college, Charlton, out of Florida State and out of University of Oregon.
Yeah.
When you look at Mariota, he has ascended more than what Winston has. Winston has had problems on and off the field since being in the NFL. Mariota last year had a prime opportunity to advance in the playoffs, didn't get it done. Jameis Winston, they brought in a new coach. They both had their 5th-year option picked up by their franchises. Neither one of them has signed a long-term deal yet. This is a make-and-break year for both of these quarterbacks. Will they be franchise quarterbacks, or will they just be journeymen the rest of their career in NFL? Bruce Arians has been known to rejuvenate quarterback career. This is Jameis Winston's best opportunity to have a quarterback coach and a head coach that understands his talent. Jameis Winston's time is to shine now. He doesn't have Ryan Fitzpatrick battling him for snaps.
No.
This is Jameis Winston's team going into training camp really for the first time in his pro career, and he has to deliver.
If you take a look at Chicago, you have Trubisky, and then you have Cousins out of Minnesota. They're going to battle in the division. Which one do you have more faith in? If you're down by 4, you got to drive 80 yards. Which quarterback do you trust to get the win? Would it be Trubisky or would it be Cousins, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, if I'm looking at your cousin in Minnesota, Charlton, I'm not trusting him on anything. I wouldn't even trust him to pick up the dinner tab right now. I like what Trubisky has done in Chicago. When you look at how he has developed under Matt Nagy, who had also developed Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes, as a rookie, was under Matt Nagy. And we saw Matt Nagy leave him and go to Chicago and develop Mr. Trubisky. They've upgraded the receiving corps in Chicago. We know they have a tremendous defense, one of the top 3 defenses overall in the NFL. If Trubisky continues the path that he's on, Charlton, and develops, Chicago is going to be the monsters of the Midway once again. Kirk Cousins has never won anything. He has a losing record in his NFL career against teams with winning records. So when you're facing teams with winning records, I don't even want to wheel Kirk Cousins out there. It seems like he's in panic mode at that point.
Yeah, he panics like too much hot sauce on those fried chicken legs you guys serve down south. Now, if you mention these next 2 players because they all started their camp today, you look at Big Ben, I want to retire Roethlisberger, and you look at Drew, I never want to retire Breeze. I think it would be easy to say which player you would trust. You got to drive 80 yards, you're down by 4 to win the game. I think everyone would say that it would be Drew Brees. But Big Ben has more Super Bowl championships, Big C. Who do you like in that position?
Well, I always liked Drew Brees early in the season. And what I saw with Drew Brees last year at the latter part of the season, I saw a tired arm quarterback because he throws the ball so frequently. He has to learn how to utilize his ground game a little more this year in New Orleans. He's older. He's not as strong delivering the ball, and as many times as he puts the ball in the air, it's going to weigh on him. Where Ben Roethlisberger is right now, Mike Tomlin has to reel him in. He led the NFL in passing yards last year. Everybody thought it was Drew Brees, but when you look around, Patrick Mahomes was the MVP. Ben Roethlisberger threw for more yards than Patrick Mahomes did. And I don't see Ben taking a step back. I think that Ben now has an offense without controversy. He's not worrying about Le'Veon Bell coming back. He's not worrying about Antonio Brown being upset. He can sit back and be comfortable and sling the ball. James Conner did an admirable job last year in the backfield. The offensive line is intact. You have stability at the head coach. I like Mike Tomlin bringing this Pittsburgh Steelers team together and getting them back to the playoffs.
Before we come up on the Big C pause, I want to just get your thoughts. I know you said that preseason doesn't matter and missing the first couple of days of opening camp doesn't matter, but you look at guys that are missing. Notables absent from training camp. Melvin Gordon for the L.A. Chargers did not report with veterans on Wednesday, entering the 5th-year option of his rookie deal. And then you look at Michael Thomas for New Orleans, entering the final year of his rookie deal at $1.15 million scheduled cash value. And then I think maybe the top 1 or 2 running backs in the league in Dallas Cowboys, Ezekiel Elliott, reportedly did not board the team plane to Oxnard, but he may have his private plane. Jerry Jones, he can set it up so you can fly around like Michael Jordan when you're the best player on the team. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, what does it mean over the years? I know the last 3 years that I played in the game, that was decades ago. I never showed up to training camp on time, didn't want to go there. That little paycheck that they were offering at that point didn't mean anything versus the days off. I might have been in town, but I wasn't in training camp. And that's what I look at with these players. The way that the leagues are set up now, Charlton, you have year-round conditioning. Players are ready to play from day one of training camp. They don't need training camp anymore to get ready for a game. They show up and they know the playbook. They study it year-round. They have it on their tablet. So it's not like you go in, they pass you this binder as they did when I was playing the game, and say, this is what we're going to run this year. We're going to install so many plays a day. The terminology only changes from team to team, but the plays are the same in every team in the league. So having a veteran player who has been an all-pro player, not in training camp, and you're knowing that he is not going to play really in the first 2 preseason games, and may play 1 quarter in the 3rd preseason game, 2 quarters in the 2nd preseason game, Charlton, it doesn't worry me at all. It just gives the media something to talk about. But these players prep themselves year-round to keep their bodies in tip-top shape because their body is their business. They're not going to let their business run down and not keep an eye on it every day.
Yeah, that's very true. Before we come up on the Big C pause, were you like Lawrence Taylor? I saw in a documentary that he would put pillows or some type of blow-up doll under his blanket because when they came in to see for curfew, he said it fooled the coaches for the Giants. Were you like that, Big C?
No, Charlton, I just brought my company in the room. I didn't put no bill in there. I'm here. Fine me. I'm okay.
That's funny. What we're going to do is come up on the Big C pause, and we're going to come back and talk about some more football players and who actually might be an old face in the league that will make people realize that sometimes, like wine, things do get better with the time. We'll take the Big C pause, and we'll come right back, and we hope that you'll come back with us. All right, welcome back to the show. This is Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And you can follow Big C Sports on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. You can follow us on YouTube. If you have a television at home, and a lot of people do, you can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast. What I really like is that app called Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show, and then I'll introduce Big C, and he'll do his thing. So we really thank our sponsors for their support. I also want to give a special shout out to a very good friend of mine. Her name is Nikki Wynn, or actually Valerie Wynn, beg your pardon, Valerie Wynn. She's with the AAG. She's a senior account executive, and I just want to thank her. She's an expert in reverse mortgages nationwide, one of the best account executives in the United States. Big C, they used Tom Selleck for the spokesperson. He was a former star from Magnum PI. Now, some people still think that he drove a Ferrari, but I doubt if it was really his. Do you think it was his, or was it rented, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, it was a prop car from the show, but a lot of people don't realize that Tom Selleck played football at USC briefly prior to an injury.
Yeah, he was a Trojan, Big C, and we know that USC has done so many things. John Wayne played at USC, maybe the most famous actor of all time from the movies that played actually college football. John Wayne also played at USC. So a lot of good things are coming on in the sports world, but I do want to thank Valerie Wynn for being a great assistant to reverse mortgages, and we're going to have more growth with her. I want to just go back to the world of NFL, because many people, they want to see the new guys on the block, the new kids on the block. I think there was a group that sang a song, the New Kids on the Block. I don't know what songs they sang, but I hear they were pretty popular. But I want to ask you, of the old faces and the new places in the league, who would have the greatest impact in the upcoming NFL season? People move around like musical chairs. Le'Veon Bell. You have C.J. Mosley with the New York Jets. Antonio Brown with the Oakland Raiders, and I think he may regret that move. You have Earl Thomas, Mark Ingram with the Baltimore Ravens, and then I'll get your thoughts on them. And then just a couple more I want to get your thoughts on, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at impact of players, and you talk about the Baltimore Ravens with Earl Thomas and Mark Ingram, I think Mark Ingram will be a stabilizing force in the Ravens' backfield. You think about him spending his first 4 years with Drew Brees in New Orleans, and being in that type of offense. So he recognizes a lot what the NFL defensive does. You bring in Earl Thomas. I mean, he's going to replace Greg Weddle, who ended up with the Rams. Eric Weddle, rather. So you did a swap at safety, but we know he's an all-pro ball-hawking safety, and he will be a great leader for that defense. They lost C.J. Mosley, but it's going to be the development of Lamar Jackson to help both Ingram and himself along in that Ravens offense.
Well, let me get your thoughts on a player that we already talked about. He has a Super Bowl, Joe Flacco, Denver Broncos now. He's going to try to do what Peyton Manning did when he helped John Elway get a championship, and they had a good defense when they won it. I think Peyton had less than 160 yards passing in Super Bowl 50 down in Santa Clara against Carolina. So Joe Flacco, Denver Broncos, and a player coming up next who only had 100 yards passing in one game for the Arizona Cardinals. He was a highly touted quarterback out of UCLA. That's Josh Rosen now with the Miami Dolphins. And maybe the most truculent, cantankerous player, Odell Beckham Jr. with the Cleveland Browns. Coming from the New York media market to Cleveland, it's a different shade of town, Big C. And I don't know if his antics will go over as long in Cleveland as it did in New York. But give me your thoughts on those players.
Well, when we look at players, Josh Rosen, he really has to develop. He could not get the job done in Arizona last year, so he was exited out to Miami for a second-round draft pick. But he has a new lease on life. I think that him being in this new environment and knowing that team has given up on him that quick will be motivation for him.
Yeah.
I like Flacco's situation if they can get him a healthy receiving core. You talk about a quarterback with a big arm and accuracy downfield. Joe Flacco has always been noted for that in his NFL career. And with that thin air and different, it's going to be, perfect for him. You think about it, he played in a cold environment in Baltimore. So coming to Denver is perfect. He's acclimated for that type of climate. But the ball carrying more in Denver, I think, will be advantageous for Joe Flacco. If they can put together a solid receiving core for him in Denver, I think he'll have a big year and challenge for some positioning in the playoffs out west. I mean, he has Kansas City and Denver in front of Denver, but the Chargers in front of him. But this is a real tough AFC West, and I see Oakland in last place in that division.
Well, that wouldn't be new for them. But let me just get one more spin on Odell Beckham. I know many people, they talk about how amazing he was as a receiver coming out of the SEC and down at LSU. And because, he was a lightning fast receiver. The guy could fly. Had he had a quarterback, maybe like Big Ben Roethlisberger, or could you imagine if he played for someone like Tom Brady that could put the ball in the money, or even if he played with Wilson out in Seattle, a guy that was a run and passing threat. He has everything he needs in Mayfield that can roll around and buy him that extra second or that extra 3 or 4 yards. But do you think they have a personality clash already, or is that just media much ado about nothing? Big, so your thoughts?
Well, what is a personality clash? I mean, you only know about players what you hear through the media. Until players start coming out saying, I have a problem in this situation, like Anthony Davis did with the New Orleans Pelicans, there's no beef within teammates. I mean, you got a team full of 53 personalities. Nobody's getting along with anybody every day. There's always going to be conflict and upheaval in any sports organization. But the media has built up this, and Odell Beckham has not even been in training camp any length of time with the Cleveland Browns, but the media has already come up and said, this is not going to work. I mean, you have to wait till the game is played. People always have differences in practice. That's why they have fights in training camp. Because hostilities and everybody doesn't get along. But until I get into a game and see somebody blow up in a game, that's when I'll figure out that whether it's working or not working.
Let me add, I'm sure you've had a couple of fights in training camp back in the day. After the fight, how do you go into the same locker room with the guy you just had fisticuffs with? Big, to your thoughts?
Well, they had to move practice from the fight because the fight wasn't going to end. That's all it is. But, once the fight is eventually over, Charlton, you're going into the locker room. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, there's always heated battles during practice all the time. Nobody's comfortable. You're out there and it's 100 degrees. You got on 25 pounds of pads and clothing, Charlton. No one's comfortable. You're irritated. You might have a little chafe somewhere, and someone rubs up against that chafe, kicks you off a little bit. So you want to get even with them.
Well, you talked about butter and how butter is a panacea for so many things. And I thought you were I know the Southern guys, you guys use a lot of butter for everything. And I thought, he's just talking. But, I've been putting butter on my mashed potatoes. But there's something I've tried that I never really thought before. I tried butter on sweet potatoes. If you don't have butter on a sweet potato and a little bit of brown sugar and cinnamon, I think you're really missing out on how good the sweet potato is. Is that anathema to butter, or do you do the same thing, Big C, as us?
Well, no, Charlton. Butter goes on all my potatoes except for my French fries.
Well, maybe we'll do butter-flavored French fries coming up soon at one of your restaurants. Now, we've talked about a lot of great players. We talked about players that fight on the same team. By the time they go to the locker room, most guys will just shake hands and say, my bad, and have a libation and get over with it, and then they'll go back and they'll fight the next day. So it's not as if it ends, Big Z. But with one player and this meteoric rise to success, want to get your thoughts on Patrick Mahomes, the darling quarterback out of Texas Tech, threw for over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, second NFL player in the history to do that. But do you expect more or less, because as a defensive guy, I want to get your personal thoughts. If you played against a quarterback that put up 5,000 yards passing in 1 year and 50 touchdowns, I would have to believe that most defensive coordinators are going to burn the midnight candle trying to figure out how do you stop him. Do you expect more or less or the same out of Mahomes? Your thoughts?
Well, you got to realize, what division did he play in?
Yeah, in the West, AFC West.
He played in the AFC West. Every defensive coordinator in the AFC West saw him how many times last year?
At least twice.
Twice. So they saw him the second time around. It still didn't change anything. Like I said, everybody in the NFL runs the same plays.
Yeah.
It's just a different, scheme that they run them under as far as the coding, what you're going to call a play.
Yeah.
Everybody runs the same plays. What Patrick Mahomes does as a quarterback is something that hasn't been seen in a long time.
Yeah.
The mobility and escapability that he has.
Yeah.
That's something you can't coach against, Charlton. It's like a receiver running past you. You can't coach it. You just hope to be further back than what he can run past.
Yes.
That's all it is. Patrick Mahomes can throw the ball from any position to any spot on the field.
Yes.
He had a receiving core that was exceptional last year. And just like what they have in Atlanta, he has to make sure that his receiving core is consistent. It's not Patrick Mahomes that will have a fall off. Even when he lost his top running back in Kareem Hunt, there was no fall off out of the backfield because of what these players do in the system, the way they run it, Charlton, is that they create mismatches.
Yes.
That's what the league is all about, creating mismatches, having players at every position. And the key to their offense is their tight end, because their tight end creates a mismatch. Their tight end is like having a wide receiver.
Yeah.
So at all times, you have nothing but receivers on the field. People talk about Gronk being a mismatch in New England.
Right.
But he wasn't as fast as Travis Kelce. So that's where all the offense was spread from. You had a couple of speed guys on the outside. They're all intact. You think about Kansas City. All their receivers are intact coming back.
Yes.
They ran running back by committee after losing Kareem Hunt, and they didn't lose a step. So this team, I feel, offensively will be just as effective. Nobody upgraded their defense in the AFC West.
Right.
So he's going to face the same defensive players that he faced last year. He's not going to sit in the pocket and try to hold the ball 4.5 seconds. He gets rid of the ball in 1.5 to 3 seconds.
Yeah.
That puts pressure on your defense, not on the offense.
Give me your thoughts on, because you're a historian when it comes to sports, who does he remind you of throughout the history of the NFL? Is there anyone that he even reminds you of, even in the slightest bit, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, he's been a quarterback of his own making. When you look at quarterbacks, you would have to put together samples of a lot of quarterbacks to get what Patrick Mahomes is. When you talk about mobility, you would have to take the mobility of a Fran Tarkenton. You talk about a quick release, you'd have to take the quick release of a Joe Namath.
Yeah.
When you're talking about scramblability, you'd have to take a quarterback like a Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, as far as a quarterback escaping. So it's not one quarterback that you talk about that can make Patrick Mahomes. You take bits and pieces of all of these quarterbacks that would come in and make the one great Patrick Mahomes, Charlton.
Yeah. I think Randall Cunningham comes to mind with me when I think about it. And even some Russell Wilson blended in there, but definitely he's a robo quarterback, the guy that you can't just find on any draft order. I want to just get your thoughts on one more thing when it comes to football, and then I want to ask you some thoughts on some college football and then some baseball. I know we talk about injuries and we talk about surgeries, and everybody has to have something. We have this presidential debate coming up, and you have many people saying we want national health care, which we really need for a highly industrialized country in the United States of America. Everyone should be able to go to the doctor. But I want to tip my hat to Nick Saban and anyone who's gone through any type of surgery, because he had hip surgery, and now, people always exaggerate, but he said this coach has won 6 national championships, and he's tied with Paul Bear Bryant for the most ever. He had hip surgery. He said he was up walking around that same day. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but it was at least within a day or two, most people are. But could you believe that he had hip surgery and he's walking around later in that day? Does that make any sense, Big C?
It makes perfect sense, Charlton. I had a hip replacement last August. You cannot leave the hospital until you get up and walk around.
Really?
After hip surgery, and I woke up, I was up walking around an hour and a half after waking up. You have no choice but to get up and walk around. And ironically, they tell you they just want you to walk, a few steps and turn around and come back.
Yeah.
I walked all the way to the elevator.
Yeah.
They asked me where was I going. I told them I was ready to go home because my hip felt better after having it replaced than it did 8 hours earlier going into the hospital. I could walk almost as good 8 hours after having a hip replaced as I could, better than I could 8 hours prior to. So what Nick Saban did was normal. And you think about the medical staff that he has at the University of Alabama.
Yeah.
He has accessibility to something that the layman person would never have accessibility to.
Yeah.
You have one of the greatest college, physical therapy training staffs that you're going to have in the nation, and he has 24-hour access to it. So they're going to provide Nick with the greatest physical therapy that any elderly person could ever have after hip replacement surgery.
Yeah, and that's amazing that, obviously you speaking to it for yourself. For a lot of people, we do need some type of national health care, especially for players that have played the game. You're going to have some worn out body parts, and because of medical science now, they can do things and make people much better. I just hope that more people have access to that, but I was amazed to see that he was up walking around that same day. But you Southern boys, I know you have your own elixir. It's not butter. There's a little bit of shine that they may have had in his blood that helped him get up so early. Big, for your thoughts?
Well, we use a little DMSO, which makes all the pain go away, Charlton.
Yeah. I hear there's a lot of good things that happen in that. So when you think about a coach like Nick Saban, and he's a little bit sullen, he's won and lost national championships. It's amazing that when Nick loses the game, it doesn't necessarily keep him out of the national championship. I remember one year they lost to Oklahoma, but that was in the playoffs. They also lost to Clemson, but that was the last second play in the national championship game, and Watson was quarterback at Clemson. And then last year they just fell apart down in Santa Clara against a Clemson team that just had it rolling that day. But we talk about Patrick Mahomes. Your thoughts on Nick Saban? When they lose titles, they often come back and win the following year. Do you think he has that in him? Or is it now just time for somebody else to replace what Alabama's built up over the last decade? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you look at what Alabama has built up and the legacy that Alabama has, this is not a farce. Teams rise up periodically and will beat anybody.
Yeah.
But consistency is what you want on a national level, and that's the brand that Alabama has created. They ran up against a tough opponent in Clemson who was right that night to win a football game.
Yeah.
They figured it out defensively how to stop Alabama, and that's what it takes. You have to have a great defensive night. Alabama has had a lot of runs to get into that national championship game, and that's not by luck.
Yeah.
That's by skill and execution. Alabama has had a host of injuries last year that a lot of people didn't realize. They didn't even go into the game with two healthy quarterbacks. Both of them were hurt.
Yeah.
They had lost a couple linebackers going into that national championship game. They were caught at the right time. But what Nick Saban has built over the last decade down in Tuscaloosa is second to none on the annals of college football. He has made history down there, Charlton.
Yeah, and he's still making history. So congratulations to St. Nick. But I want to say there's a lot of coaches, too, that were doing the same thing that Saban's doing. And I think one of the greatest that may always be more famous than Nick, doesn't have as many national titles, but Ohio State's Woody Hayes. He coached 28 seasons for the Buckeyes. He won 5 national championships. When you get voted in, you didn't play your way in. He won 13 Big Ten titles. Now there's about 19 teams in the Big Ten. He won in 1954, 1957. They won again in 1961. Woody Hayes and Ohio State won again in 1968. And the Buckeyes' last national championship under the great Woody Hayes was in 1970. Woody was 205 wins, 61 losses, and 10 ties for the Buckeyes. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you talk about that's a totally different era in football, just like we talked about with Bud Wilkinson at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Won 58 consecutive games undefeated. That meant he won a national championship every year if it's based on that. And he did not win a national championship every year, even though it took him 6 years to lose a football game. You would have thought that university would have had 5 consecutive national championships. It did not happen.
Yeah.
When you talk about these coaches and they were voted into titles, they didn't have to play a 15-game schedule to win a national championship. 11 games got you a national championship. When Woody Hayes started coaching, 10 games would get you a national championship. So when I look at the parallels between the coaches of those eras back in those days, Charlton, it can't compare because some of these coaches have had to play an extra 5 games, especially Nick Saban, to win a national championship.
That's very true. Another coach that has national acclaim, the winningest coach of all time for the great Southern California Trojans. You mentioned Tom Selleck played for the USC Trojans. The great John Wayne played, the Duke played for the USC Trojans. John McKay won 4 national titles. 1962. They won it again in 1967. John McKay won it in 1972. I think that's the first year they played Alabama and made Paul Bear Bryant say, I want to get some of those, which he meant African-American athletes, and also the last national championship by John McKay, 1974, for the USC Trojans. He had 8 appearances in the Rose Bowl. He was 5-3 versus the Big Ten champion, and you look at his overall record, he was 127 wins, 40 losses, and 8 ties. So he was what Saban is doing back in the 70s for USC. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, at that time when football was just regional also, Charlton, when you look at it back in the 60s and 70s, you didn't leave Southern California and go down to Florida and play. You didn't go to Ohio and play games. You didn't go to Michigan and play games. You didn't go down to Texas and play games.
Right.
So when we look at a lot of the national championships of that era, it was about who was on television the most.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the platform that we have now. I played back in that era where we had limited exposure on television.
Yeah.
Everybody wasn't seen on television. You think about the Pac-10 in those, I think it was the Pac-8.
Yeah, the Pac-8.
When John Robinson first started. They only had 8 teams in the conference.
Yeah.
So you only had to play, probably 6 or 7 teams within your conference to win a national championship.
Yeah, and obviously the players are a lot bigger, stronger now, and you got to travel more. It's all fair and love and war. But I do want to mention just one more coach that's better than any coach in the universe, in my opinion. You look at the late Eddie Robinson, and Eddie Robinson coached Grambling University down in the South during segregation, and he even coached during integration. He coached 55 years. He won 408 games, lost 165, and he had 15 ties. He coached more professional athletes than any coach in college football history. A black man at an all-black school in the South, where a lot of times Jim Crow kept him from playing against white teams. But he has the best record. He has the most respect. He has more people that learn under his tutelage than anyone else in the college football game, even going into the NFL. But he never got a lot of credit for it. Your thoughts on the great late Eddie Robinson, Big C?
Well, Eddie Robinson's an icon. He stands alone on the pinnacle of college football coaches. You think about Eddie Robinson coached when there was a time of segregation, when African-American players could not play in the SEC.
Yep.
Eddie Robinson took all those great athletes as well as the rest of the coaches in the SWAC, the black coaches in the SWAC, and honed these young men into fine professional athletes and private citizens, Charlton. They were a feeder league for the NFL. The SWAC was during that day.
Yeah.
When desegregation came along, the SEC benefited from what the SWAC had, Charlton. Eddie Robinson was now losing the elite players that he was sending to the NFL because they were now allowed to play in white institutions.
Yeah.
But Eddie Robinson, when those players didn't have an opportunity to play in the SEC, he was the dad, he was the father. When he came into your home and said, I'm going to take your son and treat him like mine, Eddie Robinson was honest about that.
Yeah.
He wasn't like the modern-day coaches, hey, I'm just going to take him and treat him like my son,
right.
But the minute he gets in trouble, I'm going to kick him out.
Yep.
Eddie Robinson didn't have those problems that the modern-day coaches have in these large universities that are not controlling their athletes, Charlton. Eddie Robinson was the model of what any coach should be in any era.
Yep.
He was an honorable gentleman that became a college football coach, Charlton, but he was a leader of boys and turned them all into men.
Yeah, and you think about what the great Eddie Robinson did, and then you look at a university like LSU, and they've had, $28 million, add-on to their facility for the sports complex down there. Eddie didn't have that kind of money, but he still turned out more players than anybody else. And I just appreciate paying homage to many of the great African Americans who've always left a footprint when given that opportunity. I want to close out our show tonight covering some baseball in the major leagues. The Yankees. What about the Yankees? The Yankees win again. And then think about it. 10-7 last night, and they had a great series going. The two teams in a 4-game series combined with the Twins for 57 runs, a major league record 20 home runs in 4-game series. Those two teams are playing the way you'd like to see a World Series being played. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when people say there's no excitement in baseball, they packed the house in Minnesota for that 4-game series every game, Charlton. So attendance was up in Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah.
For that. And those teams did not disappoint. as far as entertainment on the diamond, Charlton. They just really laid it out for the home crowd there in Minneapolis. And you think about the New York Yankees.
Yeah.
They've been dominant like this all year long.
Oh, yeah.
The long ball has been their mantra, and they did not fall short in Minneapolis. So, you know, we look around baseball, we look at the greatest players in baseball. You know, we look at the players who signed those long-term, big-money contracts, and all of them haven't delivered.
Yep.
Mike Trout has delivered, though. When you think about Mike Trout, Charlton, Mike Trout leads the AL in on-base percentage at 1,100.
Yeah.
He leads the AL in home runs with 33. He leads the AL in RBIs in 81. He leads the AL in walks. You think about that. He's been walked 80 times. That reminds me of Barry Bonds. He's on pace to set a career high in that mark with walks. So when you talk about a guy who's making a lot of money, who is showing his talent on the mound night in and night out, and who's in the MVP race in his division in the AL, Mike Trout is doing that. You can't say that about Bryce Harper. You can't say that about Manny Machado. You can't say that about Nolan Arenado.
Yeah.
But Mike Trout has been the consummate professional, and the Dodgers came to town, big brother.
Yeah.
Mike Trout single-handedly put the Dodgers' dominance in the Los Angeles area to rest by the Angels winning that series.
Yeah, they say Dodger blue. Well, they were all blue last night down at Chavez Ravine. It's all fair and love and war. You just want the opportunity to play. Everybody wants opportunity, no matter what it is. When you think about players with the most consecutive 30-run home run seasons at the age of 30 or older. I mean, we talk about the players at 40 years old now or late 30s, but 30 or older. Barry Bonds, 10. Rafael Palmeiro, 9. You have Mike Smith at 8, Babe Ruth at 8, and Edwin Encarnacion at 7. That's what players with the most consecutive 30 home run seasons over the age of 30, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, people are talking about how the baseball is flying out of the ballpark now, and I know those players played in an area where they said the players were juiced. What is the era that we're in right now? We just talked about the Yankees and the Twins hitting 20 home runs in a 4-game series in Minneapolis. No one's saying any of the players are juiced, and Major League Baseball on record home run pace for the year, for the entire league, for over 20 teams that have a chance to hit over 200 home runs. But when you think about those individuals, and the dominance that they represented, all of them should be in Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, especially Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
He has more home runs than anybody in the history of the game. Rafael Palmeiro, you know, testified in front of Congress that he didn't use speed, even though it was proven that he did. But for those guys to be over 30 years old and to still to be dominant at the plate, that's what the fans come to the ballpark to see.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal with what the media has to say. Show me what the player and his bat can do for my eyes when I'm in the ballpark.
Yeah, sometimes it's better to trust your eyes other than what people are telling you. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the United States of America on iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. If you have YouTube, you can follow Big C Sports. If you have a television set, and a lot of people still do, you can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast. But what I really love is the new technology called Alexa. If you have Alexa, play Big C Sports podcast. You'll hear our sponsors. You'll hear Welcome to the Show. I'll introduce Big C. He'll do his thing. So I really thank all of our sponsors for their continued support, and we look forward to more growth with them. Again, thanks to Valerie Wynn with AAG and helping with reverse mortgages, expanding what we're doing on the outside of the sports universe. I want to just close out tonight's show, as we always do, in honoring Curt Flood, who made free agency possible because he had the vision, and he was a mystic when it came to baseball and money. Tonight's matchups, Colorado at Washington, New York Yankees at Boston, and that's the biggest rivalry in baseball on the East Coast. You have Minnesota at Chicago. Do the Yankees and Minnesota have anything left in the tank, Big C, after scoring 57 times in 4 games, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, we saw the record pace that the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees did when they were across the pond in London in the last series that they played against each other. these teams excite each other, Charlton, and they give it their all for the fans when they meet up.
Yep.
I always look for epic series between the Yankees and the Red Sox.
Yeah, it's great. Even the colors, the pinstripes and that red and gray for Boston is amazing. You have Cleveland at Kansas City, Baltimore at the LA Angels. Now, the Angels they're ripe to be had, even though Baltimore is not that great of a team. But the Angels may still be celebrating from their win over the Dodgers. I think they took 2 games in that series. And then you have Texas at Oakland. The A's are a team that's streaking, Big C. They played well against Houston, and I look forward to them having another run at a wild card in the playoffs. You have Detroit at Seattle, and it's a matchup game with San Diego at New York, and then St. Louis at Pittsburgh. Do you still feel that this time of the year, we're about a week out of August, and football is going to dominate as soon as they have kickoff in 7 days? Does baseball have enough momentum to keep people following in, Big C? Your thoughts?
Oh, yes, it does. I mean, because you're talking about the number of teams that are in the pennant race right now, Charlton. That's what's exciting about baseball. You don't have runaway divisions where there's no excitement in your town and your team doesn't have an opportunity. And that's what will keep baseball in the forefront. You think about football, you don't have an opportunity for a preseason game every night.
Right.
But baseball, you have a game every night.
Yep. Well, I tell you what, it's always fair in love and war. We talked about college football. We talked about some NFL football and some players that are old-timers that have moved on to new teams. There are people holding out because they want more money, and they should probably get it. Will the concussion issues keep rearing its ugly head? Players think the game is too soft now. Terry Bradshaw talking just the other day on a national program. We had Big C say that he liked to come to practice late, so maybe that's a clue that a lot of players don't tell you. No, they don't miss their plane. They just don't want to show up at times. But we do know that there's something special about this time of year where you have the convergence, just finished NBA Finals. Now we have baseball, and now football's kicking off. It's like having Christmas every month, it seems. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, I'm excited about all the home runs that the Major League Baseball teams are hitting this year. And not only that, a week from tonight, I get a chance to lean back, pop a couple of cold ones, and watch a kickoff of an NFL football game.
Well, I thought you were going to pop a couple of cold ones and go fishing again. I think you guys fish 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can also follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.